Hello, and welcome to Season 12 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. Each week we watch the same movie on our own and then hop on a call to discuss it. This season, the theme is blatant pandering. We're going to review 10 movies that were either made in or set in the U.S. states that have downloaded the most episodes of The Horrific over the last few years. This will be a shorter season, so we may work in some listener recommendations and horror news along the way too. Thanks for listening. Confession time.
Go on.
I present myself as a very big fan of horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's, I need that street cred to do this show.
Mm.
I had never seen American Psycho, the film.
I knew that. Do you know how I knew that?
Because I told you why I haven't seen the film. Yes. I made the mistake of reading the book at a real impressionable time in my life.
Yeah, I was, when I was watching this, I was thinking, like, I have a terrible memory. Yeah. I don't know why. It was like I had like a photographic memory with this. I remember us talking about it, like talking about this movie and then talking about the book, like years and years ago, like a long time ago.
Yeah, it's one that I feel weird owning. You know what I mean? Like, because it affected me that much when I read it. The imagery in it is such that if you have a very realistic imagination, maybe, it'll mess with you. And there are very, very few books where I have like skipped a page. Yeah. Like skipped to the next page because it was getting to be too much. This is that book.
This is also coming from a guy who bought 2 copies of, what was that, Terra Firma?
Yeah.
We are on lists, dude. We're on some lists. I'll go down with you, though, even though I didn't. But this is also, I think it should just be explained for our listeners that, like, even though we're best friends, like, we are so different. Like, I don't know if I've ever had a book that I haven't skipped a page on.
But that had nothing to do with, like, disturbing them.
Yeah, and I think I own, like, a digital copy of this movie, a physical copy. Yeah. I'm sure I have it on VHS, maybe. Like, I just love our friendship. I just want to announce that to the world.
Yeah, well, me too. We are good compliments to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this one is a doozy.
Yeah. Yes. The movie, though, I would say it definitely has like a super dark comedy to it, which I feel like lightens the mood a little bit, even though it goes pretty hard. Mm-hmm. And so the movie, I feel like, was a much more pleasant experience to watch than the book was to read, because the book, or the movie, at least had some room to take a breath and laugh occasionally.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Sarah actually loved the first half of the movie because most of it was just like dark comedy satire.
Yeah. I was actually kind of wondering that myself. Yeah. I think that's, we'll definitely get into it, but it's like just shows his decline. They did it very well.
Yeah. And I think that having read the book and generally known what it was about, watching the movie, there were actually some things that I feel like were themes in the book that it conveyed really well, even though, 2 hours of movie time is way less than the amount of time it took to read it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was a very true representation of what the book was trying to communicate.
Yeah, that they could actually put on film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I will do the intro and then you can do your fun facts, because I'm assuming there was lots to read about this one.
Yes.
And then we will get in the hip to be square details.
Oh, A+.
In 2000, Lionsgate Films brought us American Psycho, a dark comedy slasher horror based on a Bret Easton Ellis novel of the same name. In this film, a young Christian Bale plays Patrick Bateman, a 27-year-old Wall Street hotshot who maintains a packed daily schedule of exercise, managing restaurant reservations, dealing with annoying investigators, and finding outlets for his urge to murder. This movie was made on a budget of $7 million and brought in over $34 million at the box office. It has only gained in popularity over the years, though, and has a strong cult following. It can currently be streamed on HBO Max. What did you learn about this movie?
So, there's a scene in this film where Patrick is describing to his lawyers, or to his lawyer on the phone, voicemail, like all the things that he had done wrong. And those were all from the book. So what he is like claiming is the things that they couldn't add from the book, which I thought was like kind of interesting. Like it's an interesting way to put it because, you know, in the book he kills a kid in the zoo, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, so as you know, soundtrack for this one, they had some pretty popular songs. I just want to make a commentary about that though. Like you have some dope songs playing throughout the movie, but then the credits roll and it's garbage. Are you kidding me? Sorry, I watched it on HBO Max too, so maybe it's just the HBO Max version. But anyway, in the book, Patrick Bateman, huge Whitney Houston fan, but she would not allow her music to be featured in this film. If you believe that. When the book came out for this American Psycho, if you guys don't know, it's a book also.
Hasn't come up.
Yeah, I don't know what yeah. One of the people who protested the book publishing, so before the movie even came out, you know, the book was protested. And one of the people was a lady named Gloria Steinem, who's also Christian Bale's stepmother. So
he really stuck it to her.
I think that, yeah, and I think they were still dating when he did the movie too. So, and they married in 2000. So 99 it came out. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Like what a weird world.
You're not my real mom.
Yeah, I'm gonna go make this American Psycho movie. Yeah, I showed her. So Christian Bale has said that he has based his performance off a couple things. One of them being a 1993 interview with Tom Cruise that he did on the Late Night with David Letterman. Supposedly, the quote is, Bale said that he saw this very intense friendliness with nothing behind the eyes.
Amazing.
Yes. I mean, just chef's kiss. During the whole filming process, he did the exact morning routine that Patrick does, and also kept his American accent throughout the whole thing, that when they had the closing party or whatever those are called, he went back to his like original accent, and people thought he was preparing for the next role.
Wow.
Which is, I thought, kind of made up, because it's like the dude's been in movies by this point, you know. It's like, yeah, you sure? But yeah, that was the case, and those are the facts for the movie. Working on sound effects.
So I was a little disoriented when this one started, to be honest, because I was like, oh, is this like super low budget or something? Because in my mind, this has always been like a early 2000s movie. I didn't realize that it was supposed to be set in the year of the book. And so they were like very deliberately trying to make it like early 90s. Yeah. And so it took me a minute to figure that out. Once I did, it made a lot more sense. Mm-hmm. But also, Fight Club was in 1999. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this one definitely had a lot of that same vibe of like living the American dream is really dystopian and existentially empty. Yeah. Like the way that movie, sort of the overall feeling of it and sort of what that drives people to, and sort of the emptiness and lack of authenticity and things, and searching for something different. And so I don't know how much of an like actual influence it had, but it seems like there was definitely something in the air at that time that was kind of speaking to people that way. And I feel like this movie sort of got into that in a way that was very original, but was also, I guess, spiritually similar. Yeah,
no, I agree too. It was so similar. I had the same thought with Fight Club, you know, reminded me of similarities between the two, that I had to see if it was wrote like if it was done by the same, because I just didn't know when I was doing the research, and it's not, for the record. Just like to clear that up. It's not, but it did 100% remind me, so much so that I just made me want to watch Fight Club as well.
Yeah.
But the actual content of it, like, you just want to know. I mean, we were obviously around 1999, but it's like not adults. We were in our own little world. So it's like, I wonder what was like the big things going on, during that time to really hit like that. Cause like you're saying, very similar vibes, between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also recently watched most of the Jeffrey Dahmer series on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And I think it was just because of that, but it really stood out to me, like the point they were making about sort of that high level business powerhouse persona being not that different than a serial killer, like very like ritual, very like wants to be in control at all times, is very like mad if they get challenged. Like it was interesting because I feel like towards the beginning of the movie, they really focused on pointing out all of his qualities that were totally, I guess, like on brand for who his character was and the job that he had, but also exactly what you would expect from a serial killer.
Yeah. And I think that, maybe it had something to do with like, the term cutters with executives, like, all right, I don't know if it's just executives, but that's when they like bring someone in to basically like just get rid of the staff kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was a big deal at the time, or it came out, but like, yeah, it's 100%. It's the same thing where you can't take in account people's emotions when doing this. So you have to like have that, I don't want to, not psychosis, but like the psychopath tendencies where you, I guess, think that you're better than them, but also that you don't give a shit about how they feel or anything like that. Like it doesn't even resonate.
Like a strong sense of detachment, it seems like. And that was one thing that was interesting that I guess I haven't seen in a lot of other movies, is that he was like part of that culture where that was normal. It wasn't just the one character that was that way trying to blend in. Yeah. He was naturally that way, but he was surrounded by people that also were that way. And so just the kind of the recurring theme of like mistaken identity and people not being able to tell each other apart because they're all just basically the same guy. And the idea of there was a scene when he has the two prostitutes and he's like, "Don't you want to know what I do?" And they look at each other and they're like, "No, not really." And he's just like, "Oh, well, I work on Wall Street. Pierce & Pierce, you ever heard of it?" And it's like, he just has nothing to talk about to anyone other than like saying where he works and what he does, what restaurants he's been to, and like basically reciting someone else's review of an album. And so it's just like, just the emptiness of it really stood out a lot in the movie. And it seemed like he had this desire to be at the top of a ladder of social status that just never ends, because someone can always beat you. Like someone else can always find a way to the top. Someone else is always going to work just as hard or harder. And it was like his frustration of never being at the top, it seemed like, was manifesting itself in his desire to kill. Mm-hmm. And just sort of that same sort of existential emptiness or unfulfilledness from like Fight Club was what really shone through the whole movie. And so of course they had like very gruesome kind of slasher scenes and stuff, but it was just, I don't know. I felt like it made the point it was trying to make really well and in a really visceral way. And a lot of times I feel like movies sacrifice the horror to prove a point, but I feel like this one did both. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. Yeah,
100%. Also, don't ever say a word that I can't Google the spelling of. I don't know how to spell visceral.
Oh.
Okay. But no, I agree. And I think that's like part of, the story itself too. Like he even says in the film, like, it was towards the end, but it was basically to the effect of like, I'm doing this because not that I don't have anything better to do, but like that, I can't get the high anymore. And that's what gives him the high, is the, killing and all that stuff. Because I assume it was based off of, I don't know, like part of me thinks that like he doesn't notice the reactions, like when he's telling the girls about, that he works where he works at, or, like in that scene, like they look at each other kind of like in a mocking way, and it's almost like he didn't recognize it. But I just also think that it has something to do with like ultra competitiveness as well, because anytime someone who he thought shouldn't be better than him, which was damn near everyone, I think, had something better than him, it was like that's when it sent him down that dark path,
Yeah.
And don't bring up business cards to this.
Right,
Good
exactly.
Lord. But I think that also is very important to the story, where like even down to the business card, like people, I feel like normal people like you and I, we're normalish, and like you see someone else, I don't necessarily have that jealousy of like what someone else has, it's just like they work for it, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just don't think about it. But like that's just like an ultra competitive thing. Maybe it's different with people we work with, but they didn't necessarily work. So I don't know. But
and he would just focus on such minute stuff where it's like, okay, if you have the best business card, then at the end of the day, that means nothing.
Right.
It means that for that day, you had the best business card, but then, a week later, somebody else is going to come with a better one.
Yeah.
It's just it's this competition that's also super empty and unfulfilling, which is kind of what the movie kept coming back to. And it's like he was trying to fill that emptiness with, sort of satisfying his more psychotic urges, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that this movie, one of the things that like it should be important to talk about is like the making of it, because like, I feel like if it was like a sloppy film, like just directing and all that it would be even more confusing than what it already is in a way. Like,
for sure.
This definitely, and it could be like maybe watching it for the first time. Obviously, it's a little bit different since I knew what was coming, but it's just like you see the decline throughout the whole thing. One of the things they did, one of the facts is, William Dafoe read his lines 3 different ways each time, and the directors picked which one they wanted, and one would be where he knew that Patrick Bateman was the killer, one where he thought he was, and one where he didn't think he was. And so that's why it was always confusing.
Interesting.
And it's like, that's so much thought that has to be put into that film, and it's like, that's hard work, and like, I just think it's amazing. It's like, that's just like in-depth stuff that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Super important for the story too.
Yeah. And I thought the acting was perfect. And I kind of wonder if maybe I was wondering how much of that was supposed to be from like you hearing him from Patrick's perspective. Or like what he wanted to believe, or like what his paranoia was telling him at the time or something. But yeah, it was to your point about it being confusing. If you wanted to try and explain the storylines, you would have a hard time. There were things that just kind of started and stopped and didn't go anywhere and didn't come back around, and just kind of got, it felt almost more like impressionistic, where it was just these sets of scenes that had kind of a general flow and storyline, but were really about creating like the impressions of what was going on. And so I think that works better when you have a book that you can base it on, because then it's like, okay, well, a lot of people are going to be familiar with the source material. They already know like the higher overarching storyline. So now we can really just choose the scenes to make like impactful and not spend a bunch of time trying to connect the dots. But I think also if I had seen this without having previously read the book, there were a lot of things I would have been confused about, or I would have been like trying to figure out like why stuff in the plot didn't make sense more.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too. And in reading up on it, what I kind of brought it down to was like 2 points. Like one is like, is it real or not? and
Yeah.
you got to figure that out, which is difficult. I don't know if anyone does, honestly, besides like maybe the writer, actually know.
Yeah. So you're, I think, getting into the ending a little bit, which I think brings me to another part in my notes where I saw the Fight Club comparison.
Yeah.
But where he's talking to his lawyer, and his lawyer's like, well, that was a joke. You didn't kill Paul Allen. And he's just like totally dismissive about it. He's like, yes, I did. He's like, I had dinner with Paul in London twice last week. He's alive and well. And then you're just like, oh, damn, like, what do I even know?
Right.
But that, very similar to, kind of the big reveal in Fight Club where it's like, oh, was this all in his head the whole time?
Yeah. But then, in that same scene with his lawyer calls him Davis. He thinks and so it's like, well, he doesn't know who he had lunch with. Yeah. And so it's like your brain is literally just going in circles. You're like, wait, hold up. Like, is this, it just, it kind of tripped you out a little bit.
Did you have a favorite scene in this movie?
Yeah, I would say so basically when Sarah stopped watching probably, but I think the scenes when you talk about psychopath, which is what he is.
Huey Lewis?
Yeah, the whole Huey Lewis scene, obviously, and that dance was an improv for the record. I guess the director really liked him doing that. Initially they busted up laughing, but they added it. I mean, that scene's just so crazy because you see what's going on behind, and he's talking about Huey Lewis in the news like he's reading an article from, Rolling Stone or something. And then also, the scene with the chainsaw where he's chasing, drops it on her on the stairs. Yeah. That's just creative, creative way of writing. And also we need to check in on Brett Ellis because it's you thought of that.
Right. If you think that's bad, I wanted to send the guy a sympathy card after I read the book.
Yeah.
I was like, this dude's been through some stuff.
And also a couple of things I was reading was saying he loosely based that character off his dad.
Damn.
Yeah. But those, I would definitely say those, but once it got, when I was watching this, and I was kind of the one that put the list together for this season. And so, you have that kind of fear where you're like, did I remember this movie right? I no longer look at what they suggest movies are, if they're horror or anything like that. And so I'm kind of freaking out. And then once he got into the heavy shit, it's oh no. This is 100%. This is 100% horror film. So basically that on, but I want to get to the ending after I figure out what your favorite scenes are.
Oh, okay. Well, so my favorite scene in the movie, or the one that stood out the most to me, or where I felt the most dread, that where a horror movie just grabs you and puts you on edge, was when he invited the secretary to dinner and then has her come to his house beforehand.
Yeah.
Because you've already seen him be super violent, murder people, murder a dog, be a complete terrible person with no boundaries, right? And she, in my opinion, was the only person in the whole movie that had any redeeming qualities up until that point.
Yeah.
She seemed like a well-adjusted person that cared about other people. And so and you can tell that she's flattered that he's inviting her over, and you just get this sinking feeling, and she's going to die. And so she goes over, and there's the whole thing where he's getting the nail gun and kind of holding it by his side, and they're talking, and she's being really nice to him, but also has a little bit of self-doubt or self-consciousness, maybe she's not dressed nice enough to go to this restaurant and everything. And they're having this conversation, and then he just slowly puts the nail gun up to the back of her head while she's sitting on the couch, and he hesitates, and that extra moment of just anticipation of not wanting it to happen, but knowing that it will. And then the phone rings.
Yeah.
And it's Saved by the Bell. And then he goes and sits down and is basically giving her a chance to leave, but not completely forcing it. It's really her choice.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of that scene in, No Country for Old Men, where it's like, no, you have to make a choice.
Yeah. Pick
and it's like super heavy. Yeah, you have to pick, and then which I feel like the scenes ended very differently, but just that setup and that intensity of it and that dread and the danger and everything about it was just so intense.
Yeah.
And then she got to walk away, and you just felt relieved as a human. You know what I mean? It was just like, holy crap! Like that was such a brush with immediate horrific death. And I don't know. I thought everything about it was just pulled off amazingly from a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah, I mean, because even at the start of that scene too, like she was almost just seemed like she was just coming in to like for conversation, and he literally wasn't responding. Like,
yeah, right.
Just, and you know, she even asked a question. He didn't even respond to that. Just asked her about dinner. Like it was just like it hit like, oh, this is who I'll kill next. You know, and then for her to find the journal too, you know, so like there's one person who knows like what's in his head, and it's her, you know, and it's super, super creepy, super horror-esque. I think is another one that I thought I liked was, and it was because it was kind of funny, was when he's running through like the entrance, like the revolving entrance, and like kind of looks off and realizes he hadn't killed someone, so he just keeps going and shoots them and then he leaves. But like he's in a panic. That was another one where it was just like that's clever. Like that's just a clever way of doing this. And then I also liked the acting of it because I was really watching Christian Bale, like to see, because there were doubts like when he was casted for this film, and like he looks off to his right where like you can see the reflection of the guy behind him, but then like he's going to his left, like the door revolves to the left. And it was just that little piece that I was like, gosh, that's actually like accurate. I feel like that's very accurate. Like he could see the reflection and then he goes back to the left, you know, and I know it's small and minor, but like just caught me off guard, I guess.
Yeah.
But just the humor of that.
Yeah. Well, and also like when he's shooting at the cops.
Yes.
And then their car just explodes and he just like looks down at the gun completely dumbfounded.
Yeah. And that's also what messes with your brain, because you're like, he knows
it's
that's
starting
not
to feel very surreal at that point. Yeah.
And that's why it's like, why I'm almost like fangirling over this film, because it's like, I just feel like it was put together so well that it's like, I mean, besides like Memento, I don't know of a movie that's like ever made you more confused on what was actually going on, but like you're okay with it because it's just good. You know, it's just a good film. I mean, I guess Fight Club's another good example, you know, of that too, but yeah.
Yeah. And then the last scene I had written down that I really liked was when he goes back to Paul's apartment and they've just completely like cleaned it, painted it, and are showing it. And at that point, I took away from it like, oh, they realized what was happening and they went in and they saw all that stuff and they were just like, oh, well, we're not going to miss out on this opportunity to rent this and make a lot of money. We'll just clean it up, act like nothing happened, and put it back on the market, which is very consistent with sort of the whole like cultural vibe of the movie. But then with everything else, you know, you think back on that and you're like, oh, well, did any of that even happen, or was that all just in his head?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a prime example, because that's legit like the two theories on the film. Like that's another thing that they bring up. It's like, no, it's just another crazy business person that's willing to do whatever they can to make the money, you know, so, or not make money, but you know what I mean? And
stay on top.
Get the sale. Yeah. Stay on top. And I mean, and that's something I can't explain, because you know that realtor, or whoever that lady was that, you know, I think it was a realtor, she knew something was up. I mean, like just by how she was acting, and it was either that he's acting crazy and she didn't want him in the apartment, or she knows that he probably is the one doing it, considering the dead bodies were in the closet he was looking in. And
and she doesn't care about like catching him or anything. She just wants to, you know, get the place rented.
She wants to sell. So
get the weird guy out of there. Get the clients in.
Man. Yeah, this was it's definitely an intense one. Also, it was shorter than I remembered, too.
Yeah. I was thankful for that.
Yeah. Always thankful for that.
Short and sweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this movie's just all over the place, but, like, definitely horror, definitely, like, messed up.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's not like like, we've seen some pretty jacked up ones, but, you know, like, not like Human Centipede.
Right.
But, like, also...
Or even, like, Martyrs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just, leaves you thinking. I don't think it maybe has the same message that maybe it did when this book initially came out. I don't know, maybe it does, if you know what the message is, but...
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like from a movie making perspective, it was really, really well done. The subject matter was obviously, you know, pretty gory and horrific in a number of parts, and so it won't be everybody's cup of tea, but I went into it honestly kind of dreading it. And then when he killed the dog, I was just like, damn it, I'm not ready for this. Mm-hmm. But then it didn't go as hard as I was worried it might based on the book. So, yeah.
Also, we had literally just talked about how we hadn't seen a dog die in a horror film.
I know, we jinxed it.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, that was me, man. That was all me. I killed that dog.
Oh, no, I was apologizing to the dog.
Oh, I don't give a shit about the dog.
Whoa.
It's dead. It died in 1987.
I honor his memory.
I'm going to call him Lambone.
I feel like that's a little disrespectful.
Oh, I thought it was a sweet name.
Rambone.
Rambone.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.